Well, I was going to introduce you both, but Pip's done such an awesome job. But thank you so much. We're so honoured to have you here today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, completely honoured. And you might find in your goodie bags a copy of the latest Vogue, so and for a complete treat. And I think one of the things that's been absolutely phenomenal about Vogue is obviously the way that it's completely overhauled and changed itself and really put diversity right at the heart of the publication. So I'd love to know what the impact has been on the brand and what the, why you've done that, Vanessa.
It's really actually, I have to say, Edward's big initiative. And Edward and I had been speaking for a while, just kind of hypothetically about what he'd been doing with his career. I'd been at Condé Nast for 10 years. I was at GQ before. And I really felt that there was a necessity, really. I think in the media, especially in the mainstream media, we have a responsibility to reflect our societies as much as possible and in a positive light. And so for me, it felt like everybody had started to talk about diversity. Edward had made a career of it almost, actually, long before it became in vogue. But we'd gone past the point where it was something that seemed like a nice thing to do to something that felt essential. And what's really interesting is what diversity means, from our Edward and I's kind of strategizing and ideas and, idealism sometimes, versus what has become the popular view of diversity has been quite interesting. There's a little bit of work to be done on that, I think. But overwhelmingly, it's been incredible positive response. And I think for us, it's been really important to show that diversity is not something that's just nice to do and almost kind of philanthropic. We're doing a favor to the communities we reflect. But what my role is to show that it's actually good for business. So one of my first appointments internally was Priya. So Priya has brought not only amazing expertise to the team and the most qualified person for the job, absolutely, but happened to bring in a different perspective because she's a different ethnicity to most of the team. So for us, it's about changing our teams slowly and properly, and also changing the content as a result. So from the inside out, rather than sort of checking boxes with our content, but not really having people internally who can do it justice and give it flavour. So the short answer is it's been good.
And what's been the impact on your readers? What kind of response have you had from the readership?
Well, the response has been, I knew in my heart it was going to create a big response. I mean, I don't know if any of you were following when Edward was appointed. He hadn't even started yet, and it was sort of, the press was out of control, and I think it just was so overwhelming for everyone involved. Our press team were just like, we don't know what to do, and there were just so many requests, and then came the content, and it's just been incredible. It's like working on a launch, really. People are so engaged. For me, the worst possible response is nothing, So if people are not engaged, even if they don't feel angry about something, they don't feel moved to comment, then we've done something wrong. And what we've had is that people have a sort of sense of ownership with Vogue anyway. It's part of our sort of vernacular. It's part of, everyone's grown up. It's 100 years old here, 125 years old in America. If something's in fashion, it's in Vogue. Just as if you search something, you Google it, So there has been this amazing ownership where people feel, I think, a sense of pride, that they can comment much more, that we want to hear their opinions, I think. People turn up to the office all the time. It's sparked a lot of creative juices. So we have amazing people creating takes on the things that we've done. We have people sometimes criticizing, which, to be honest, I think is a good thing. I think for us, when the very first sit down that Edward and I had, we talked about sparking debate. So that's not about, the conversation was not about adoration, although that's great. It was about sparking debate, and where people feel that they can comment and say, I love that, but I preferred this, is okay. We don't want too much of it, but it's okay. Yeah, so.
It's good for conversations, isn't it? You had like a little bit of comment and debate over Nicole Kidman, didn't you, just lately? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, it was just really interesting because the second issue, we had two Aussie actresses on the cover for our Hollywood issue. We generally not had actresses on the covers before, and generally, if you look at magazines, everybody's very young, and one of the pillars of diversity that Edward takes very seriously is age. You know, he has a lot of friends who are in the beauty industry, the fashion industry, the film industry, and what we see is that there is a challenge for women around aging in the spotlight and out of the spotlight as well. And so without much sort of fanfare about age, Nicole Kidman was on the cover of February issue, and there was a really interesting response, which was, where's the diversity? There's a white woman, two blonde women on the cover, you promised us diversity. And we were like, it's really interesting that people can't see that, you know, that I think we're so used to magazine covers looking a certain way, and we're so, what's become in Vogue as the sort of pillar of diversity that we want to see as a signifier of greater diversity are more people of colour on covers, because what that says, it's a byword for saying we're open-minded. And while I think that is really, really good and a great starting point, you know, I call it the Edward effect. When I go to newsstands and I see covers and covers and covers of brown girls, I think this is amazing, but it's only the beginning. What I want to know is, what about the harder conversations? What about the things that are more difficult to convey on a cover? What about the things that we don't yet know we want to see? So I'm really a big advocate of true inclusion. It's difficult to do. It takes a long time to establish and to do well. And I just thought it was really fascinating that so many people missed that. And it kind of showed us that we had a lot more work to do.
I think it's really fascinating. In the advertising sector, only about 5% of the workforce is actually over 50.
Yeah.
And by not having those role models up there for people to see and admire and see that you can age elegantly and gracefully and beautifully and still be employable and valuable, then you know we can't really change the diversity story for everybody.
Yeah.
I think it speaks a lot to what Rosie and Scylla were speaking about earlier this morning as well, in terms of you know, the ads that they're doing and actually speaking to age as a kind of another diverse audience. They were saying that, you know, people weren't quite ready for it, but I think it very much speaks to kind of what everyone's feeling at the moment. Yeah.
So congratulations on the job at
thanks.
Vogue, Priya. Priya's been in the role for how many months?
This is 2 months, yes.
2
I'm
months.
very new.
So when I first met Priya, she was actually working for Vice Virtua as the general manager there. So it's, you know, fantastic to see you join forces. I think you're going to be a formidable duo.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so my next question is, by diversifying Vogue, what has been the impact on the advertising community? What have you seen in a response from brands?
Yeah. So I guess in terms of them working with us and taking...
Yes, have you seen new brands come on board? And have you seen them look to change as well?
Yeah, so it's really interesting for me. So I haven't been here very long, but what I've noticed is we've worked with the brands that we've kind of always worked with are more traditional brands, but we're working with a whole new plethora of brands as well who are kind of interested in our fresh kind of lens on the world, I guess. So recently we did a project with Christian Louboutin. I think people are really always surprised that we've never worked with them before. And we did a film around kind of the nude collection, which obviously speaks to our wider mission around inclusion, because obviously nude means different things for different people. But that was kind of a really amazing experience. Or we've been working with Mulberry, for example, who we've worked with before, but then more recently have worked with them in ways that are a bit different. So they gave us access to their preview show. We gave our audience access to that in real time. That was something that was a first for kind of both of us, which has been brilliant. So the brands are very much coming with us. And then in the same breath, we're working with the Nikes of the world. but not just kind of as a pure fashion story, but also talking to them in terms of fitness and wellness. And so that feels kind of like a new territory that we have the license to be able to do with new brands and take a new lens on things. So yeah, I would say brands are very much kind of coming with us along the journey, which is amazing.
We're trying to figure out how to get everybody in.
Yeah.
So actually, when I first got the job, I think I was thinking about drumming up business, you know, how do we, and it's like, oh, okay,
like,
that's
no,
not the
we don't
thing.
know.
Yeah. I think what was really interesting on that is Christian, myself and Edward had dinner, and he was sort of saying, he's never advertised at all before. The other thing, and the reason why Priya is so important, is what I know is that branded content is now one of the most important pillars of our advertising, because what's happening, and what I knew would happen, although I didn't know it would happen to this scale, I have to admit, is that people want to attach to our narrative. So I think that one of the great things that we're doing with Vogue is, of course, it's still about beautiful imagery. It's about actually, I think, even more beautiful imagery. Yeah. But it's also about narratives that reflect really intelligent women, that are challenging, where we talk about women's triumphs and struggles. So we're having things that are about late miscarriage, which would never have been Vogue territory before, polyamory, of course, ethnicity. We did a great piece on the new suffragettes and all of those things. And so when we spoke to Christian, he said, I never felt the need to advertise because people know what my brand is. But now the thing is, you are the only brand speaking in a language that I think reflects mine. So the whole reason that he started the nudes collection was he was finding it really frustrating when people would say, oh, there's a nude slip on a shoot or a nude shoe. And he's like, that is a peach shoe. It's like, that would not be nude on my sister or on my, you know. So I think he's a real advocate for if you ever have a chance to Google him and hear him talk about his beauty range and what makes people feel beautiful, what beauty is, it's really incredible. So this celebration of kind of diversity and difference being really beautiful, that narrative of ours really stuck with him, and it's the reason that we did a piece of content for him all around the nude. So it was really nice. So in that way, I think all of the people like Palace Skate, who would never have been in Vogue before, are now tapping into the kinds of things that we're talking about.
I think that's the thing, is you're telling the stories that everyone wants to be part of and to tell. And I was reading about, obviously you were in the Evening Standard the other night, massive double page spread. But just what's been the impact on the sales?
Oh, it's been amazing. Really, really incredible. So I started in January. The announcement went out in September of last year. So people always think I've been in place for ages. So I started day one. I was sort of handed my targets and thought, off you go, have a lovely time. And of course, because Edward, basically every appointment at Vogue creates this huge kind of press. You know, our bosses were just like, this is going to be a breeze. You're going to, you know, figures are going to be through the roof. So day one, the targets were super, super high. And I was a bit nervous because what I'm trying to do and what Edward's trying to do is our predecessors were both there for a quarter of a century, you know, 25 years each. And that means, and they did brilliant things in their time, but what we're trying to do is change quite entrenched behaviors. There's an incredible talent pool at Vogue, but having people work in a different way, think in a different way takes time. So I was really nervous about that first quarter and how we affect change at the same time as having people deliver immediately. But actually, as I said, brands have really, really engaged with the editorial narrative and also with, I think, the fact that we can create content for them that fits within our environment and narrative. And so it's been incredible, particularly digital, which is up over 25%.
Wow, amazing.
And yeah, we're doing a lot in the other activity. Everybody wants experiential, and we kind of like to do that. We're very social beings. Yeah. Edward loves to go out. So we're doing much more in that space, and that revenue from events and things is up over 1,000%. So.
Wow,
I think
amazing.
I think it's testament as well to your and Edward's relationship, because I've never really worked in a business, having worked in a publishing business before, where the editorial and commercial relationship is so close, and there's an amazing relationship there, and it makes the commercial creative work better. Well, it makes everything better, actually, but I think it is kind of testament to that as well, and that's been really, really refreshing for me.
I just don't see how it can work any other way.
No,
yeah.
you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
I guess one thing that's really been interesting for me, I guess, being older, having grown up in a really print-heavy world, and, back in the 90s when, ID magazine, which you worked for once upon a time, and print and publishing was all about the print. What's the difference, what's the balance now between the print versus the digital? And I guess this is more a question for you, Priya, is how do you see digital transformation? I guess that's some of the things that you've been exploring at Vice originally. How do you see bringing that towards, into the Vogue world?
I mean, we're very cognizant of the fact that, people experience Vogue as a brand. That is various touch points, and it's not just a linear journey. They're not kind of just looking at the print mag and then, going online. It's like they're speaking to us in like lots of different touch points. So we're very cognizant of kind of speaking to the audience as a brand. Digitally, I think what that means is we've got really, really good relationships with all our platforms. So we've got good relationships with Insta and Snap and YouTube and Facebook. And so we make sure that whatever we're putting out is kind of relevant to that platform, but also the behaviors on that platform. So wherever people are kind of seeing us, it feels like a seamless experience. I think also for me, probably not as sexy to talk about, but there's a very real logistical thing in terms of the way that we've looked at our teams. So we have we've looked to change, I guess, our staffing to reflect the fact that we now kind of need to speak in a more digital way. So we have in-house an engagement manager who is she's amazing, and she's very kind of rooted in data and insights in terms of what's working, and we kind of get those updates from her daily. So that really helps us in terms of our ideation and our strategic approach to the work. We've doubled our digital project management functions. So when I'm kind of saying all of this, it's actually like we've got this infrastructure in place to be able to deliver, which is really, really important. And then within the team, we've also got a new digital editor called Alice Casely-Hayford, who is fantastic. And she's in charge of the site, socials, and video. So kind of having all those three kind of sections in place means that we can actually deliver digital creation against the actual vision, really. So that's huge for us.
I'm just really curious to know, it's not on the list as a question, but which is your biggest digital growth platform in terms of the different platforms? Is it Snap or Insta, YouTube, Facebook? Where do you see, obviously...
Our
socials are huge at the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, Instagram is really powerful for us because we're a visual platform, brand in lots of ways. Snap has been huge growth. Snap started on Edward's first day, and we had millions of followers in what it was insane. So we're trying to use each platform in a really different way, and one of the things I've tasked Priya with is looking at, from our perspective, from a publishing perspective, who are we speaking to, and so therefore which brands do we align in that space. And I'm trying to ensure that the messaging is slightly different but all part of the same sort of vibe and narrative. My big view, and the thing that I'm evangelical about with digital, which is vital, absolutely vital, is that Vogue is a brand. It's the brand, in my view. It's and if you spend any time at Vogue and you look at the archives, we're doing this very painful office redesign at the moment, but one of the nice bits is to look back and look at old covers from the 20s, and it's just incredible. And you look at the historical points. Vogue was invented before the Zip, before the motor car, was on the road. So it's a brand, and I think that the magazine is the most famous pillar of the brand because it's been around. But what Vogue isn't is just a magazine. So what's been really important for me is that we build up digital, which was already actually pretty strong, but Edward and I hired a new digital editor who is incredible, as Priya said. And then Priya and the rest of the team were in the process of hiring a social media editor. So if anyone out there...
Did you hear that? Anyone want to come and work for Vogue?
There's another job
another one,
actually, which is...
Okay, you're going to be inundated.
Yeah, creative director for the publishing team. So what we're doing is making sure the other pillars of the brand reflect what's going on in the magazine, which is strong, and all of those things, and it's working pretty well.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So we've just got time for one quick question, which was, given what you know now, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self, Priya? Learn the piano quicker.
I do need to learn the piano quicker. Thank you for that. I think if I had to speak to him, I would tell myself to be a bit more patient. I think when I was little, I always wanted to be a bit older and be kind of more experienced and be there. And now I'm a little bit older. I think I still need to have a word with myself to be like in the here now and just be kind of enjoying it and not be impatient to be at the next step, really. That's a word I have with myself daily, basically.
And you, Vanessa?
Oh, I thought I dodged that one.
You're like, you take it. I was like,
I would probably tell myself not to wear that, the various fashion mistakes that I made, which shows, thank God, that social media wasn't around and I was some really bad fashion faux pas. I would tell myself probably to be kind. Particularly be kind to myself. I've always been very kind to the people, but I think I was always very frustrated that I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I would get so panicked when someone, people would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my friend would say, a lawyer or a doctor, really confidently like that. And I'd be like, I don't know, what is that? And actually, some of my best lessons have come from, and most fun moments actually, from just trying things out, going on the journey, experiencing it, and absolutely everything that I have done up until this point, every career, every job, every contact that I made on sometimes a career path that wasn't then going to pan out as a career path, feeds in a really practical way actually to the things I'm doing now. So I'm still friends with every boss, colleagues, and now I look back and think, thank God, but I've had a bit of anxiety about it when I was younger.
Great pieces of advice. So we've got time just for a couple of questions. I'm looking at the team over here. Was there any questions that have come through Twitter? Are you happy to take a random question?
Yeah.
So is
We
anyone...
don't have to answer it.
So, who's got a question for this formidable team on stage today? Don't feel intimidated. Hi.
I was just wondering, you've been talking a lot about the top level of people that you've hired, and I was wondering how you're helping some of the intro people coming in with diversity from Vogue.
Sure. Well, yeah, it's a great question, actually. From my perspective, the diversity of all kinds, diversity of perspective is what we're looking for. I have been involved in a paid internship scheme at Condé Nast for the last 6 years, which I was really proud to initiate and still going on, where I hire in people predominantly who may not have had otherwise had the opportunity to come to Condé Nast. And that might be just because of networks, socioeconomic background, all of those things. So that's been going on for 6 years. 90% of the people who come in for that paid internship scheme now either work in the company or in our associated brands through interviews and things that we've set up. And I'm continuing that at Vogue. So we're actually hiring for an intern to start in June.
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
3 jobs.
Yes, exactly, I know. So hiring, our HR team are like, please, stop hiring. But I think also I work a lot with, I'm a fellow at the University of the Arts, and I mentor a lot of students there whom are generally from different backgrounds and may have challenges and so on, and they tend to sort of, one way or another, feed through. So it's something I'm super focused on.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. We've run out of time. I would have loved to have had you on here for even longer. It's gone like in a blink. So could you give it up for the Vogue team? Thank you so much.